Hello everyone, this is Rick Grantham of rickgrantham.com. Today we're going to talk about drop-down lists in Excel. What are they and why do you need them? So first off, what are they? They are those things that you use for data validation. Those drop-down lists. If you're looking to type in January or February into a list, instead of having to type that in every single time, it's a drop-down list that's actually in Excel. But more importantly, why do you need them, and are there different types that you can use? So the reason you would use these are, particularly in business, is to ensure that you have consistency in your data. And to borrow something from Six Sigma, in Six Sigma what you're trying to do is to reduce the number of errors or reduce the number of defects that happen in your system, that happen in your processes. Right? Because the number of defects there are, or the number of things that go wrong, requires rework. And that means you have to put now effort against fixing all of your data, or fixing the problem that, had it been done right the first time, had it been done accurately, would not have caused that rework. A lot of studies have shown that rework or waste in most systems, or what they'll call hidden factories, factories that only exist because things go wrong, are usually about 30% of all your expenses go towards that. 30% of all your effort goes to fix things that are wrong. So that's where data validation comes in Excel, making sure that data is put in appropriately the first time and making it foolproof so that you don't have to go and do rework later to where someone might have typed in January and another person might have said January with a lowercase j, and another person might have just said Jan, and another person would have misspelled it, and another person would have said month 01. So to ensure that none of that happens is the reason that you should use data validation, the reason you should use drop-down lists in Excel. So let's talk about three major types of drop-down lists. The first one is called data validation, and this is probably the one you're most familiar with, where in Excel you would go to your data validation in your top ribbon, and there would be a drop-down list. But there are some cons to doing it that way. Number one is you can't size it any differently than the size of the cell, right? So it just shows up in the cell. Secondly, there is no error unless you're actually in the cell. So it's not intuitive right off the bat that you're actually looking at a drop-down list until you click in the cell. And one of the biggest problems with doing it this way is that the font is very small, right? The font is difficult to see. And you can't alter the font. You can't alter the font size or anything like that. And so as a result, it just becomes very difficult to see, and you really have to zoom in to be able to see the drop-down list at all and to see all the different selections. Additionally, usually you can only see 8 or so items in your drop-down list. So if you have 12 months, as an example, you'd only be able to see the first 8 months before you have to scroll down. But it is the most common one used because it's the easiest, right? It's already available up in the top ribbon, and so that's used quite often. But there are other options for those who want to be a little fancier. Option number 2 is form controls. So if you go over to your developer tab, there's something called form control. And within form control, there is a combo box. Now, some of the benefits of using a combo box is that the drop-down is always visible. Now, before we had talked about data validation, and data validation was only visible once you selected in the cell, and then you could see the little drop-down box. Well, the cool thing about this is you can resize that box, and it's actually an object that sits on top of the cell. So the drop-down menu or the drop-down selector is always visible. So the end user always knows, right, that is a drop-down box in Excel. Additionally, it can link to a cell. And by that I mean the value can link to a cell, or the number or the item that you select in the list can link to a cell. And here's what I mean. If you select January from a drop-down list of months, the first item in the list that you selected, number 1, can be transferred to another cell, right? So you can do different formulas for this then. So as a person selects April, the number 4 could be shot over to another cell, which could be used in a formula. So that's definitely a benefit. There is an additional way to do this, though, and this is the third option that I would recommend that you take a look at. And this is also in the Developer tab, and this is in the ActiveX section. And this is also a combo box in the ActiveX. The cool thing about this is it allows you to adjust the font size, adjust the number of rows that are visible, so you can have, you can show all 12 months without having to scroll. And where in the other two options you couldn't zoom in, it's always small font, here you can make the font larger. And so you can make the font, a size 15 bold if you wanted to, and make that much larger so the person can see it. Additionally, though, what makes this a lot better than the form control combo box that we talked about, in the form control combo box that we talked about, a value, or the value that you selected, say January, number 1 went to a different cell, April, number 4 went to another cell. The cool thing about this one, though, the combo box in ActiveX, is whenever you select January, the word January can go to that cell. Or the word April, the actual label, the actual text of what you select is what shows up. And that value can be linked to a cell. So there you have it. Those are the reasons that you would use a drop-down box and the 3 major types of drop-down boxes. Come and visit us at rickgrantham.com where we talk about this and much more to help you with your business with Excel. Until next time, be a champion.